On today's installment of Locked On Texans, cut down day means only one thing. Coach DeMeco Ryans and General Manager Nick Caserio has a lot of tough decisions to make.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers, to this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your sports analyst, football analyst, Johnson Sports Guy Hickman on the other side of the screen, Texans Credential Media member, all the way up in Detroit, Cody Davis. Got a fun show ahead for you guys, but thank you to all of our first-time listeners and viewers. Please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. And again, we can't do this show without our everyday is coming back, continuing to show us love, spreading the word of this show. So we thank you guys, and we do the show for you guys and to talk Texans, which is what we're going to do today. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The first day, it's Monday, we time-stamping it. The first day of cuts for the Houston Texans, very uneventful. That was given. When you look at the day, it was kind of getting rid of some guys that you pretty much knew wasn't going to make the roster. That being said, Cody, take us away.
You know, everybody talk about, the first day of cut down day being quote unquote uneventful. But John, I just think that just goes hand in hand with the Houston Texans finally being one of the elite teams in the league. And I say that because, look, I remember there was a moment when the Houston Texans was trying to decide their 53-man roster over the last, 2 to 3 seasons, when it was in like literally the bottom of the league. You already knew who was going to be part of that 53-man roster because they was making cuts as they go. However, for the first time since you and I have been covering this team, we are looking at this roster thinking to ourselves, okay, we are only less than 24 hours away from the initial cut down day deadline, and we are yet to have a full sense on who's going to be part of the 53-man roster, the practice squad roster, and other players who are going to be shipped around or have an opportunity to join another team to continue their career. So we're going to talk about that in today's show. And, of course, the one guy that's definitely going to be part of this 53-man roster, but I do want to give us an injury update, Will Anderson Jr. We have not seen him since about the second going into the third week of training camp, but Coach DeMeco Ryans gave some positive news about him. But we're going to get this latest installment of Locked On Texans kicked off, just looking at the process and the potential, what is going on with the Houston Texans as of right now. Here's what Coach DeMeco Ryans had to say about the process of going into cut down day.
I think the process is, first off, it provides guys now, having this one final cut. I think it provides a lot of the young guys, first off, that opportunity to participate in that last preseason game and get more film out there where they wouldn't have had that opportunity based on the previous year's rule. So I like that part of it, where those guys can get more tape and get evaluated by the entire league, right? And then when it comes down to it, right, you will have, over 1,000 players hitting the waiver wire. So it is difficult to try to comb through that. So our scouting staff, those people in those positions, they have to be ready. They have to be ahead of things, kind of thinking ahead on, who can help us, right? And it's a difficult time to really try to add someone else to your roster from another team.
I like that from DeMeco Ryans. He also had an opportunity to just talk about how himself and Nick Caserio work together. And he said, for myself, I let Nick and his staff, our scouting staff, they do a good job of trying to comb through the rosters here over the next couple of days to see if there is anywhere we can add or upgrade our roster. But for me right now, dealing solely with the guys that we have on our team, and I just really rely on Nick and his staff and trust the work that they put in to see if there's anybody else that they feel that's worthy of upgrading our roster. So I rely heavily on them when it comes to those decisions. Those two have been in each other's pocket from day one since DeMeco got to Houston, in a good way, not in the Malcolm X way, but in a good way. they've really done a good job working hand in hand to upgrade this team. And I honestly believe that we will see an upgrade. Now, for day one for the Houston Texans on Monday, Cody, no matter how you spin it, uneventful. And that's a good thing, I think, for Houston, right? Because day one, they released linebacker Jacob Phillips, Dater Island, and McTelvin Igum, Tariq Barnes as well. And if I mispronounced McTelvin's name, please forgive me. Agim, I think that's what it's actually pronounced. But 4 players, not nothing major. I don't think nobody's hitting the panic button. I think for Houston, DeMeco has already said we are in a good place right now. We got good problems. I think that they are looking at, okay, what do we have here on our roster? Okay, do we need these guys? No, we don't. These other guys have performed better than some of these players whenever they got an opportunity to play, whether that be preseason or in training camp and practice. And we're going to talk about major trades on the horizon, but I think right now it was a very uneventful day for, unless you were the Minnesota Vikings who cut, I think, like 10 players, right? It was a very uneventful day throughout the NFL. I only saw a couple of players that I thought, maybe Houston will look at their players. Deion Jones from the Bills, linebacker, safety Ronnie Harrison from the Colts. And those are 2 positions where you can make it make sense. Like Deion Jones, is he a name at this point? Is his better days behind him? Look at the tape. I'm not sure. Ronnie Harrison, right? If you move on from an MJ Stewart, Brandon Hill is out for the remainder of the year with his injury. So that leaves Houston with Jimmy Ward, the rookie Kalen Bullock, and Jalen Petrie, who's playing the nickel. Want to move him back, or do you want to bring in some more insurance at that position? But other than that, across the league, day one, there was not a player that I said, oh my gosh, Houston should go out there and go get him. And I think for Houston, they're going to make their cuts, absolutely. But I also think they're looking around the league and waiting for some players that could become available and that could influence who they let go. And I think they have a good bunch of players that they feel like they can move on from or maybe assign to their practice squad. But I do think the rest of the league is going to influence some of Houston's decisions. Not all, of course. This is a different team. But some of those decisions could be influenced by who's getting released from their respective teams.
You say some, I'm going to go on the limb and say I think it's going to affect a majority of their decisions on who they let go. And I only say that because I went back and I listened to Coach DeMeco Ryans' press conference. There were several times where he brought up the waiver wire, several times where he talked about looking across the league, seeing who's going to be out there in free agency or whatever the case might be. And that spoke to me because John, throughout this whole entire training camp, more so when we talked about the lack of depth at linebacker with the secondary, with the offensive line, even the running back position before Cam Akers came out of nowhere and tried to be Arian Foster 2.0, whatever the hell he was trying to be. But, every time we talk about the lack of depth at certain positions, John, one thing that you always hampered on was you cannot wait to get to this part of training camp, of preseason, because without a shadow of a doubt that Nick Caserio and Coach DeMeco Ryans was definitely going to shop around the league. And especially when you consider that there are going to be several players who are going to have an opportunity to pick where they want to go, the Houston Texans are going to be at the top of their list. And John, some of the names that you just mentioned, I do agree. And I think those are the type of names that you're going to be looking at because, once again, this team is top heavy. But at the end of the day, if you can have an opportunity to improve the depth, whether it be waiver wire, whether it be through a trade, whether it be doing free agency or whatever the case might be, you're looking at a situation where the Houston Texans will definitely also bring in some new guys to help build this roster because, once again, this is not a team that's just saying, we're just going to compete for a wild card spot. No, they truly believe that they can represent this conference come February 2025 in New Orleans, and you already know what big game I'm referring to. But, over the next 24 hours, we definitely going to see this roster look completely different. But will there be some major trades over the horizon? We shall see, because there are some guys who, whether you consider them a lot for the 53-man roster or whether you see them as being on the bubble, the Houston Texans might make some moves in order to get some assets back in order to help build in their roster, whether for 2024 or for the future as well.
But before we talk about any potential trades right now, guys, I want to let you guys in on a little secret. If you haven't already known about it, FanDuel is hooking up all of their customers. They got something for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. It's a good thing that the better days are ahead and the bad days are in the past, because Houston is in a place where it ain't like Seattle, not the Seahawks, but it ain't raining every day no more. 3 years it was raining, it was painful. Now you got some sunshine.
My sunshine has come. That's my song.
My sunshine. Exactly. And that sunshine came by way of California to Ohio State, down to Houston and CJ Stroud, but they got an opportunity again with nearly $20 million to really upgrade this roster. And Cody, what area do they go towards?
Man, I've been beating on the table about this the whole entire training camp, and I'm not going to change my tune right now, man. Of course, you got to take a look at the area that they're going to is cornerback. You know, once again, you got Darius Stingley Jr., you got Kamari Lassiter, man. Both of those guys are definitely going to be your top 2 corners, but outside of that, who do you have? To repeat what I said on yesterday, that's part of the reason why I was disappointed in Desmond King. John, I know you did not agree. However, I thought Desmond King could at least establish himself as CB3, CB4, give you some type of depth, you know, given the fact that we have seen him perform as an outside corner or whatever the case might be. But to see him literally just give up on Saturday, you know, his name is definitely going to be on that cut list later on today. But John, how will the Houston Texans address the need at every single position? And now we got to take a look at, you know, whether or not the Houston Texans will make some trades over the horizon, because our good friend Jordan Schultz over at Bleacher Report kind of shook up the NFL world yesterday morning by reporting that several teams have made call to the Houston Texans about John Mechie. And even though we have been rooting for John Mechie, and I do believe that he's still going to be part of the 53-man roster, and I do not think that the Houston Texans will trade him, I'm not surprised that teams have started calling the Houston Texans, seeing whether or not John Mechie is available, because this wide receiving core is crowded. And not only is it crowded, you're looking at a situation where even when you take a look at the wide receiver battle between himself and Xavier Hutchinson, it just shows how much talent the Houston Texans have at that position.
Yeah, we have a really tight wide receiver room, right? It's a lot of good players in their room. A lot of guys made a lot of plays throughout the training camp practices, and also some guys showed up in the games as well. Feel really good about the room that we have. You know, you have of course, the top 3 guys that we have are all big-time playmakers, but all the other guys have stepped up and made plays at some point, right? And that's a good problem to have, Jonathan. When you have as many guys as we have, it's a really good problem, and I'm definitely excited about the group. I think Coach McDaniel's done a great job of working with that group and getting those guys better, right? Talk about guys like Xavier Hutchinson, just seeing the progress he's made from year 1 to year 2. It's been pretty cool, right, to see his growth, see his development.
Adam Schefter of ESPN, our good friend, we had him on the show last season. But Adam put together,
holler at us.
Exactly. You know, we call him Adam now. But Adam had put together a list of potential trade candidates for every single team for the Houston Texans, in addition to John Mechie. He also added Robert Woods and Damian Pierce. John, when you take a look at, you know, the 3 candidates that could possibly be traded, I'm going to go with Robert Woods, because once again, when you take a look at that wide receiving core, I look at Robert Woods and I think to myself, man, I don't see him being a part of this team moving forward.
Yeah. Let me address the John Mechie rumors. While I don't think it'll happen, if a wide receiver needed team came calling for, and like, hey, Houston, man, what do y'all want for him? You know, he's a former second rounder who has not produced in the NFL based off of his time on the field. Take everything else out of it. He's not been a productive player, though his ceiling and talent screams productivity. Hasn't happened yet. We all know why. Let's move forward. For Houston, I think a second round, you're not getting a second rounder back. I don't think you get a third rounder back. I'm not sure you get a fourth rounder back. Now, 4 is where you can see a team overspending. But when would you get that fourth rounder back? 5 is where, okay, well, that's more realistic for a wide receiver needy team. But does that pick hold the same weight as John Mechie being here, healthy? In preseason, he was productive the last 2 games. Almost had a touchdown. Should have had a touchdown Saturday. Has 10 catches for 100 yards and a TD, something along those lines. And he's also, I think, a damn good insurance policy with Stephon Diggs on a 1-year deal. Right? And he's also, next year he'll be going into year 3 of this offense. Year 3 with CJ Stroud. Right? So I wouldn't trade John Mechie. Plain and simple. Robert Woods and Dameon Pierce are two different totally conversations to have. For Houston, does it make more sense to cut and release Robert Woods or trade him? Because if you trade him, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, you take on some of that money from his contract instead of not taking on any of that money from his contract. You save $5 million compared to whatever else you wouldn't save. And for Dameon Pierce, I do look at a team like the Dallas Cowboys as a good fit for him, as a running back needy team that could come calling. And again, it comes down to what am I getting back in return? And DeMeco Ryans has spoke so highly of John Mechie, so highly of Xavier Hutchinson, so highly of Dameon Pierce. And remember, guys, DeMeco made it known when he first got to Houston. I want to build men. Character matters. And so when we talk about Desmond King, character matters. Okay, we see how that goes, right? We're all anticipating him being let go. When you talk about Mitch, you talk about Dameon Pierce. Character matters in favor of those players. So I think these are all good problems for Houston to have. Now, in terms of trading for a player, with the question marks surrounding Christian Harris and his status up in the air, we're going to talk about Will Anderson Jr. We have not really gotten an update for Christian Harris. Ernest Jones from the LA Rams, I think, makes a lot of sense for Houston. The last 2 seasons, you go back to last year, 145 tackles, 74 solo, 4.5 sacks. The year before, 114, 66 solo, no sack, 1 forced fumble, 3 interceptions in his entire career, 12 pass deflections. How much do we want to have Henry To'oTo'o out there? Jalen Petrie will be a phenomenal piece alongside the linebackers. We know that around the line of scrimmage, you get the better version of him. He is going to be an extension of the linebacker group, but that matters for a championship team. And Ernest Jones, I think at this point, if we're honest, we love Christian Harris. We believe he can be, one of those top-tier young linebackers. But Ernest Jones is already there. Ernest Jones has already done things in the NFL that Christian Harris has not been able to do so as of yet. We believe he'll get there. Do you bank on the potential, or do you bank on the fact that, okay, Ernest Jones has played for a team, and I think he was on a Super Bowl team a few years ago, but he's been on a team with a playoff run and has that experience of what we need here in Houston. And then we just have Christian Harris when he comes back. He's going to be on a contract anyways. Their flexibility, if you trade for him, again, what do you give up for Ernest Jones? Is it just a pick for a player? Is it a pick player for a player? I'm not sure. Good thing I'm not a general manager, but I do think that as of right now, he is probably the more interesting player, interesting name for Houston that requested a trade, didn't request a trade. I'm not sure what's going on, but anytime a story like that comes out, a player wants to move around. I ain't getting paid yet. Y'all ain't took care of me yet. Let me go somewhere else where I can perform and potentially get it back. And Houston had the money for it. So I would, if I'm Houston and if I have these question marks surrounding Christian Harris, I would absolutely look at Ernest Jones and say, man, you know what? can he give us what we believe Christian Harris can give us right now? And I think the answer to that is yes.
Before we move on and give an injury update for Will Anderson Jr., I do want to mention this, man, and I hope this don't sound too crazy, but I don't want to see Robert Woods and Noah Brown make this team. And I say that because, first and foremost, unless, depending on how they see Steven Sims, because I think it's safe to say that he's going to be the team primary returner. You're looking at a situation where the Houston Texans 6 wide receiver are going to be, of course, the big three: John Mechie, Xavier Hutchinson, and Steven Sims. So do you add, if they just view Sims as a returner and you just want to add that extra wide receiver just for the sake of it, then I would say Robert Woods, but then that's going to give you 7 wide receivers. And I don't know whether or not the Houston Texans will do that. The one guy that I know should be on the outside looking in is Noah Brown. And I understand how valuable Noah Brown was last year for this team when he was healthy. But once again, the key word for the second consecutive year is when healthy. And when we go all the way back to OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and training camp, I think we could count on one hand how many times Noah Brown was active and participating in training camp. And I understand you can't control injuries and all that other good stuff. However, when I take a look at the fact that you already know who your big three is, when I take a look at the fact that Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie literally answered the call and battled through, people talking about them. Remember, going into training camp, a lot of people had Xavier Hutchinson being on a bubble. Then 2 weeks in, John Mechie ended up being on a bubble. Now we're looking at it.
Going into that third preseason game, it was when we haven't heard nothing from John Mechie since that catch. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And both of those guys produce, and even Robert Woods to a certain extent. I will say, the first 2-3 weeks of training camp, especially when I was out there, it didn't matter if Robert Woods was running with the first, second, or third team. Man, he had an opportunity to play, I believe, in that third preseason game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, if I'm not mistaken. No, the second preseason game. Robert Woods was still out there trying to make plays and made some damn good plays regardless of who his quarterback was. So I just look at it from a situation, man. I don't think Noah Brown should be a part of this 53-man roster. Robert Woods, depending on how they view Steven Sims, and look, I think it's safe to say that I am a fan of Steven Sims. I think he's going to be damn good on special teams, damn good as a returner, and he even showcased if he needs to have his number called to make plays on the offensive side of the ball, he will have an opportunity to do so. I just wanted to throw that out there because since we're talking a lot about John Mechie and his wide receiving core, I think those two guys are definitely on the bubble or potential trade candidates that you could get something back for. And we all know General Manager Nick Caserio is good for shipping a player off, get us some extra draft pick. The next thing you know, he's going to flip that draft pick into some player. It's like, man, how in the hell did the Texans get this player?
I do want to add that DeMeco talked about, if he and the scouts have had any conversations about players who have been waived by other teams as we're talking about trades or just adding guys. He said, yeah, through those conversations, Nick Caserio is having most of those conversations, and it goes back to how does the organization work well, and it's with myself being the head coach and Nick as the general manager being tied together and in a constant communication with one another and always working together on everything that we do. There's a trust factor there. I trust what Nick does, and he knows the type of players that we're looking for and the type of players that we're about. So it makes the transition for me, it makes all of the transactions very seamless because of the trust that we have in one another. I wanted to say that because I do believe that, again, with the amount of money that Houston has, they will make upgrades, they will make updates, they will add to this team. And I believe that there won't be no back and forth, no bitterness between the two because they understand they got one goal right now, and that's to win the Super Bowl. And in order to win the Super Bowl, you're going to need good depth. You're going to need players like John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson. You're going to need a good return game. By the way, if you look at the 2023 season in terms of the 2024 preseason returns, guys have been able to return more, and the field the start of the field for teams have been better as well. So you're going to need a player like Steven Sims or somebody back there you can trust. You're going to need a Will Anderson Jr. opposite of Danielle Hunter. So we're going to give you guys an injury update on the other side of the break.
Yeah, our decisions will be made on the roster, guys, over the next couple of days. And you guys know we still have a lot of things to work through when it comes to the roster. You know, when you talk about those guys specifically, Matchy and Damian, I think both guys they've done really well in practice settings and also in the game. So both guys I've seen, I know what those guys are about. I know who they are as people. And so, but you guys will see those decisions here over the next couple of days.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans. We have talked and dissected and evaluate so many players who we believe will be cut, may not be cut.
Do we think Houston moves on from Cam Akers? Not that they should.
No,
do we
they
think
don't.
That they will.
They don't, man. They don't. I don't see a situation that because once again, think about it. British Brooks, fullback.
If he makes the roster, we're pinning him in. Like, there's going to be some moves that are made Tuesday where we're going to sit back and be like, wow, I can't believe that they did it.
I don't see. That's the thing. I don't see.
Did it.
Look, Cam Akers has made it to the point.
Undeniable.
It's undeniable. And not only will he make the 53-man roster, he's going to be RB number 2. Which brings me back to a question that I posed on yesterday's show. Even if Dameon Pierce make this team, and I think as of right now, it's 6:59 p.m. on Monday afternoon, timestamp. Even at this moment in time, I think it's safe to say he makes a 53-man roster. What is his role going to be? Is he just going to sit on the bench, or is he going to be your third down back? Like I don't see a situation where the Houston Texans move on from Cam Akers. I truly don't see it. Cam Akers has literally blown my mind throughout this whole entire training camp. And hopefully, I promise this is going to be the last time I say this, y'all listeners and viewers. When the young man was signed on a Sunday, he was asked on Monday, can you give us your thinking, some what went into the decision of bringing in Cam Akers. And the only thing Coach DeMeco Ryans said, we just brought him in to see if he can compete, period. That's all he said. Just those little few words. And now here we are, months since that statement, and this young man has definitely made himself into getting a really good, valuable role for the Houston Texans in 2024. So, John, I don't know how you feel about Cam Akers, but he's definitely going to make this team.
I feel like he should make this team. Let's talk about Will Anderson, giving him an update. Is he on track to be ready, back in action for the Colts week 1?
According to Coach DeMeco Ryans, they will literally see how he feels over the next couple of days. But he did say that Will has been doing really good in his recovery. For those of you guys who don't know, Will Anderson Jr. did go down with an ankle injury about week 2 going into week 3 of training camp, and we have not seen him. However, given what Coach DeMeco Ryans said on Monday, I do believe that Will Anderson Jr. will be ready come the start of the regular season against the Indianapolis Colts. And I definitely hope so, because looking at the fact that you're going up against a Colts team that is going to be motivated, given how the way their season ended last year, given the fact that even though you improve your run defense, and Will Anderson Jr. played a big part in there, Jonathan Taylor was the one running back who gave you like almost, what was it, like 150, 170 something yards in that final game of the 2023 regular season. And not only that, you also got to take a look at the fact that you're going to have Anthony Richardson, who I know did not have a good preseason, but you still got to take a look at the reality of the situation that regardless of how bad Anthony Richardson looked during that preseason game, he's still a damn good dual threat quarterback. So you're definitely going to need Will Anderson Jr. to try to get your first victory of the 2024 campaign, but it seems like right now his ankle injury is trending in the right direction.
That's good to hear. I think with Will Anderson out on that field, that just gives the Houston Texans defense more ammunition to create pressure on teams. And with how this roster is currently put together, with a rookie cornerback, I'm not worried about Derek Stingley, with a rookie cornerback, with some of the question marks at linebacker, you need that pressure up front to get it cranked off. And so hopefully he will be ready week 1 against the Indianapolis Colts. Excuse me. Please make sure you guys continue to watch the Locked On Texans podcast. The next time y'all hear from us, we will be talking about more cuts and if Houston made a deal or not, or 2 or 3 to upgrade this roster. We're going to dive into all of that. So please subscribe to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Also give me a follow on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, it's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.